players of Star Trek Adventures First Response would like to thank the Complex Games Apologist.
All right, so I'm sure that this looks a little different than other videos in the series, and well, that's because I'm not at home surrounded by my library and my dogs. I am, in fact, sitting in a pretty cold car with a cup of coffee that used to be a lot warmer than it is now. And I'm waiting. So, while I'm waiting, I'm thinking. And I'm still thinking about the second session of Star Trek Adventures, Part B of the pilot. And we haven't really talked too much openly about the name of the pilot, but the name that I'm floating, and in the past, I have changed the names, the working title of the episode after the thing has been shot, right? But I do find at times, as a framing device, the title can be helpful. This first episode, and who knows how many episodes between the beginning of the campaign and when I first used this technique of sharing the title with the players, it can be useful as a framing device when, as the GM, I feel like there is a truckload of ambiguity to any setup or any frame of the situation that I'm capable of. And so by sharing the title, up on the screen, I can help the players connect with what I'm trying to set up for them as the inciting moment, right? This is my contribution, right? This is my spark to the tinder that is their characters, that is their values, that is everything, that they have announced that they want to play. Well, what's going to set it in motion this week? What kind of context can I contribute? So if I don't feel terribly comfortable with my ability to communicate that, then I'll do something like, if it's a face-to-face game, I'll do something like talking to people and making sure that the conversation touches on the topics that I'm thinking about as I try to build that opening situation, or as I try and set up context in the backdrop, the background of play, right? But lacking that, we've got the stilted pace of textual communication, especially divided by time zone, or we have blunter tools like sharing the working title of the adventure, which is not a word I'm comfortable with using, but it's not an adventure unless it was an adventure. It might be some other word. But anyway, so for this What Were You Thinking video, obviously I guess I was thinking that I was able to communicate what the scenario was about, what the situation was, because I didn't consider sharing the working title. The working title is The Nature of Threat. And this is a multi-layered title, as is my habit. A title doesn't feel satisfying to me unless it has multiple interpretations or layers of meaning. And if I can find different layers of meaning in it, that means that other people can too. If I'm stuck on just one plane of meaning, then I'm not satisfied with it. So anyway, the nature of threat. What were you thinking in part B? Just imagine that the car noises as they go by, that's the gentle rain on the stones outside the quiet place where you are relaxing to listen to this. And imagine that I'm in a similarly quiet, relaxing place. And the honking of taxi driver horns as they try to, through the power of the horn, violate the laws of physics and the laws of the country. Those are geese flying overhead, bringing a message of hope to people in southern climes. So what was I thinking for part B? I was thinking nothing in terms of push, like I've got to get the group to do this. I was and remain confident that this group is taking their roles seriously. And I have gotten as feedback statements or signs that they're interested in each other's characters and each other's character development, and that they are still interested in exploring this expression of Star Trek. So I don't have to feel that need to push them anywhere. Oh, they'll have more fun if they do this, so I'm going to make that happen. So I did, however, want to introduce some character connections. I've got interesting things from the characters' backgrounds. The transporter accident that Yang experienced, the plague that Ron's character experienced, the dramatic background that Joseph's character grew up in. These kinds of things are interesting. They may not be pilot episode things, but we will only know that in hindsight. This is my perspective. There's going to be moments that are screaming out for conversation from the people on my side of the game, the NPCs that are in my control, of the secondary characters that I have to operate as minor characters and that kind of thing, right? The other voices, the voices of the setting. There are going to be moments where these things necessarily, or not necessarily, but naturally fit together. So, because of the nature of this situation, I see many hooks to Ensign Yang's background. I see a lot of hooks. I feel a lot of desire to be able to include some of the background that he has demonstrated in the character. So my notion of Starfleet, as soon as I listened to his thoughts about creating his character, those things became inextricably linked, and these are tied to the episodes that we talked about as a group, or we shared together as a group, as being defining for this campaign. The nature of the military officers with the diplomatic corps, the strong belief in the ideals of the Federation, yet signs that some of its most noteworthy members, the starship captains, the very best of the very best, right? There's signs that they are under so much pressure that they crack, that they're pushed so far beyond their limits that they are used up, burn out, and break down. We see this from the very, very first intimations of the captain character in the Menagerie, the Cage, right? We see this in the young version of Captain Pike, and we see it in Kirk in his private conversations with Bones, and we see it in the other starship captains that we come across in the voyage of the USS Enterprise. So there are there are fracture lines in the society of the Federation. How am I going to portray it? Yang's backstory gives me a vehicle to make that not just backdrop, not just something that the GM fills time with and we have to listen to him talk about his setting, right? Instead, it transforms into the personal experience, the living background of the character. So it's a tremendous gift. Similarly, on exactly the same degree of intensity, we have Korsakov's alien artifact. There is something about, and it's an awkward notion for me, there's something about how the original series almost seems like a patchwork, not even almost, is a patchwork of different writers' work. And some of it is picked up and becomes an obvious connecting thread from episode after episode after episode. What started out as someone's clever idea gets picked up by other writers, gets picked up by showrunners, and gets becomes a part of the cultural awareness of the show itself, like it's always been there, like it must have been part of a plan from the beginning, this kind of stuff. And you can hear Ron talk about these notions in his video, Trek and Me. So this is very much one of the reasons why I want to set Star Trek Adventures in the original series era. And it's also one of the things that can give you pause, right? Are you sitting down and considering playing Star Trek Adventures with someone who likes Cat's Paw and Spock's Brain and the Gamesters of Triskelion and things like this? Or are you sitting down with someone who likes A Piece of the Action, The Omega Glory, Patterns of Force? Or are you sitting down with someone who likes Balance of Terror, Day of the Dove, right? There are different feelings to Star Trek, because many Star Trek episodes are quite different one from the other, and some of them are completely isolated, one-off things. And so the alien artifact that Korsakov has found is one of those ways to present that kind of universe, but apply that sense of, if the Enterprise were not on a 5-year mission, if they had to operate closer to home in a specific fashion like the Avicenna does, what would their understanding of some of these regions of space be like? What if they had to continually operate near the Metron's system, close by to the Gorn, right? What would that experience be like? It'd be maybe in a way similar to the Federation and Klingon experience with the Organians, except the Organians seem to be able to operate on a much larger scale than the Metrons are willing to do, right? If some of these references to episodes are flying past you because you haven't seen the episodes, please make note of the episode titles and watch them. Early Star Trek might not be your thing, but there's a reason why the show became a cult classic, and I think the episodes I'm talking about are at least part of that reason. And it will certainly help understand what I was thinking as I put together the stuff that I am intentionally putting together in the campaign. So one of those things being, at least in this region of space, is this alien culture. And Korsakov's alien artifact, which Ron and I have talked about what it might do, what it might mean, what it might represent, and he has made clear in his reflections that he hopes matters right away. Because he hopes it matters right away, it makes it a very convenient tool for bringing out this this element of the original series that has always made sense to me. There's the idea, the Arthur C. Clarke idea of the gardeners of the universe, and that one of the reasons why in original Trek we can borrow the idea that there are so many human and humanoid species and so many Earth-like planets, or planets which are like Earth, out there, is because older species, older spacefaring species, put them there. They had purposes, but what are they? Without knowing who those species are and what they were doing, all we're left with is just this one piece of evidence. Like, why is there another Earth out there floating in space? So I like that kind of idea, and it's something that in the original series isn't explored. We meet the Organians, and then they're never really talked about again. We meet the Metrons, and they're not talked about again. We meet the Squire of Gothos and his parents, and they're never really talked about again, right? There's all these fragments of setting that appear and then are abandoned. So what if we don't abandon them? And so the key to that is the alien artifact, and that alien artifact will be part of the connection to the setting in exactly the same way that Yang's connection to the political side of Starfleet and the Federation is. Now with Joseph, the strongest thread I want to pull on for the pilot is the notion of being the acting captain. And what's really cool to me, and one thing that makes me feel good, is when we have things that logically fit together in a way that feels right from totally random threads, right? We could not predict how the characters would be created, how the character creation process would inspire the players. We had no control over that at all. And yet we wind up with an acting captain who will be under tremendous scrutiny because of lots of reasons. The fact that he's a Vulcan, the fact that this ship's previous captain, this is another random thread that we kind of pieced together from Ron's alien artifact, and so on and so forth. So we've got an acting captain. We've got an acting captain because the actual captain was removed. The removal is perhaps tied to the alien artifact. There's scrutiny. Why? Well, because we had to remove a captain. Because this is, a ship that's being repurposed and put into a new duty assignment. Eyes are upon it, and one of its new crew members is tied to a prominent family. All those things fit together really nicely in a way that gets the characters talking, that gets the players worrying about their characters, that gets people motivated in doing things to protect their characters, to enhance their position. So what I'm thinking about, gosh, this is a long video. This is a long wait, and this car is really cold now. But what I'm thinking about is being sensitive to that right moment to bring these details out naturally from the environment. Our characters are currently involved in a crisis. That's what they're thinking about. But characters who are not in this very moment, in peril, rescuing people, are doing other things. So when is the right time for one of our highly competent bridge crew secondary characters to try to contact the captain with a completed report on the Potemkin? When is the right time to bring in the obligatory message from Starfleet about, what's going on? We haven't heard from the Potemkin. We haven't heard from you. We haven't heard from the base. It's just, you've been dispatched to go to the outpost and then silence. What's going on? When's the right time to have a moment of recognition for the design features of the alien artifact that's in Korsakov's possession and this environment? When is the right time to introduce these things? This is what I'm thinking about. So in part B, I didn't get an opportunity. I didn't feel like it was the right time to introduce Yang's connections to movers and shakers. I didn't feel like it was the right time to introduce recognition of alien architecture that matches the device. And I didn't feel like it was time to get into a long, drawn-out, or to add on this additional complication or distraction of messages from Starfleet to the captain. But those things will need to come in Part C, or this has really been nothing but an exercise in overcoming challenges, right? And if the characters were built without values, if they were built without these life path experiences, then that would be okay. That would be fine. But the game is richer than that. It's more than that, and it operates on several planes at the same time. There is the Star Trek adventure part, which I need to bring. But there's also the experience of being Star Trek bridge crew, which I need to facilitate, but is in the hands of the players. They need to willingly constrain themselves. They need to willingly constrain themselves with what we have agreed Star Trek is. And then in the confines of that welcome prison, interact with each other and with the Star Trek adventure so that we can have an experience deeper than just watching the show. So that's what I'm thinking about. Now, where I feel like I missed a beat, but where I also feel like I didn't, was in the first use of the transporters. Ensign Yang, in his background, had a traumatic experience with transport, and as a result, vastly prefers to use shuttles and other means of transportation. He is not alone in Starfleet. We've seen this sentiment echoed by others, and for different or similar reasons. Well, KC knows about this. KC brings this forward as a role-playing element, has his character visibly blanch. Characters are told, it's obvious. He includes dialogue about his fears, and he role-plays being willing to tough it out. But nothing was said. Nobody interacted with it. Wasn't really my place to interact either as the disembodied voice of, hey, remember, Yang had a transporter accident. And it wasn't my place in the vehicle of the characters who were present, who were very busy with a very important task. It wasn't my place for them to look up and say, wow, you're taking the transporter? You know, or something to those effects, right? The threads, the links, the hooks thrown out by the player were left. And I can see reasons for this, right? In real life, when someone is feeling uncomfortable, it's often a very useful strategy to connect with them, but on a different level. We don't talk about the thing that's bothering them. We talk to them about other things. And so we can see that played out. But we're not in everybody's head, so we're not really sure if that's what that is, or if, you know, the cue was missed. And that's some of the fun part of play. Like, why did this conversation take place the way that it did? Later on, we see the acting captain reach out and try and steady the nerves of the young ensign. So, do we think that the players missed the cues? No. Do we think that they made a conscious decision to play that way? Yes. Do we know why? No. So we don't know if this is done for, you know, artistic reasons of character. We don't know if this is a sense of realism. We don't know if this is because they, like me, were feeling time pressure and wanting to move this conversation about the transporter to the other end of the transporter ride, or whatever. So it's interesting, and that's the stuff of reflection. So from the point of the transporter happening, I started to think about that quality from Yang's background. It occupied my mind, wondering how it was going to come out and what it's going to be like when they have to go beam back up in the transporter with their 5 other people, right? And and then realize they're going to have to beam back down to a more perilous location. Yang is going to be under a lot of strain. So somewhere in there, in the context of that transporter situation, I think there are opportunities for all the things that I've been talking about to take place. But it's interesting talking about it, verbalizing it here like this, how much of my mind was on Part C. It became obvious very early on in Part B that there would need to be a Part C, that there was nothing that felt like resolution of the pilot episode happening or was likely to happen. And my experience of time in Part B, it felt like about an hour and was 2. So, I wasn't even thinking about, reaching a cliffhanger or moving toward describing things in a way that would speed things up or slow things down. I was just in the moment, having a good time interacting and playing with the players. So it was a pretty positive experience all the way around. The creation of the secondary characters. The first one that gets created, Mbutu, he is created piece by piece, very, very explicitly and expressly. And the reason why I did it that way was because all of the players have expressed interest in that procedure and in the idea of playing these characters. So that was a use of time that didn't really need to be considered. It had to happen that way. And you'll see that later on, we handle it very differently when Lieutenant Commander Jane Finch is created. All we need is her name. So, the distribution of rules talk versus play, I guess we can say, is something that's continually occupying my mind. And it will be nice when I'm no longer thinking about that. Because it takes a little bit of time to get back in tune with the vocabulary of the show, with the visual vocabulary you want to use to describe it. Like, for example, we're using away team. And every time they said away team, every time I said away team, in my mind I'm going, no, it's not an away team, it's a landing party. Right? But I also don't want to be in a position of correcting people unless I'm correcting myself. And I don't want to have an out-of-character conversation in our short window of playtime to talk about this kind of stuff. We know what away team means. We know that away team equals landing party. Is it something that we need to stop play for to say, wait, it's actually a landing party, and then have everyone go, oh yeah, you're right, it's a landing party. We've been saying away team. Yeah, we've been saying away. Yep. That's an out of game consideration. So as we go through, I'm always monitoring, right? So there's the attention is always split, and when that's gone, I'm going to feel better about lots of things. And then all the mistakes that I make are going to be truly mine, and that always feels better, because that's something that you can actually work to solve, rather than wish you were better trying to do 2 things at the same time, which is a fool's errand. So, what was I thinking? There are some things I can't reveal now, things like the wave of particles, things like the who's, what's, where's and how's whys of this particular crisis. But we'll talk about them soon enough. Anyway, this is a very, very long video. So, what was I thinking? I was thinking these things. I guess I would like to add in, was I satisfied so far? When I look at the Part A and Part B together, right? We have the receipt of orders. We have this fantastic call to unity among the crew. Like, we are the Federation. We are not going to be divided. This is our chief medical officer. We have a crisis to go to, and people to save. Really glad that that happened. And we travel at warp to arrive at the location where we discover the Potemkin is empty, abandoned, whatever. The crew is missing. We discover that the crisis on the planet is only getting worse. And we understand, that the reason why the Potemkin is called here, the reason why the newly rechristened Avicenna has been called here, is because of their proximity to this location, because there's so much trouble. Well, they arrive just in time to have a little bit of communication, but then the damage on the planet reaches levels where communication is no longer possible. So then, crossing over into Part B, they scan to make sure that they can safely beam down, which will be the fastest way and easiest way to get to trapped people, or if they have to, use the shuttles. And if they have to use the shuttles, where they will land and things like that. So that's how we open the second session, Part B. They determine that they can beam down. They figure out where they're going to beam down. They make it as safe as possible to beam down, because in this game, beaming isn't an automatic thing. This is actually quite difficult. And so they beam down and they discover a small pocket of survivors and just blow that challenge out of the water. It was so satisfying to see what the dice had to say about things, and to see the players getting a grip on how the rules work so they could bring their different advantages and talents and personality quirks to bear to set this up. And then we need to go to rescue. They've got to be beamed out of there. But before that can happen, we have the first intimation of this particle wave, likely the second time, based on the cliffhanger from before, from the end of Part A. This second wave of particles coming up from the planet. And what does it mean? What is it going to do? That's the meat for Part C. But the real focus of Part C has to be on who these characters are, why they're on the ship, why things matter, right? What is the social context of the ship? And I will be very interested to see how, for my part, I can help make that happen in Part C. So I hope you'll come along with me for that ride, and that you'll find these What Were You Thinking videos of interest, and that something in them might spark conversation about how you run games and similar situations that you have had, and we can create a dialogue around the role of being a game master, being the person at the table who has some hand in preparation that leads to useful, connected, effective improvisation within the bounds of what the group has agreed to do. Sounds like fun? please stay tuned. The playlist is continuing to grow with videos from everybody. And until next time, hopefully I'll be in a much warmer place without all these lapping waves and gentle rain and honking geese. Take care.